5 talents, doubled his money. And likewise, he who had received 2 gained 2 more also. But he who had received 1 went and dug in the ground and hid his Lord's money. And after a long time, the Lord of those servants came and settled accounts with them. So he who had received 5 talents came and brought 5 others, saying, Lord, you delivered to me 5 talents. Look, I have gained 5 more talents besides them. His Lord said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. You are faithful over a few things. I will make you a ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of your Lord. He also who had received 2 talents came and said, Lord, you delivered to me 2 talents. Look, I have gained 2 more talents besides them. His Lord said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of your Lord. Then he who had received the 1 talent came and said, Lord, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you have not sown and gathering where you have not scattered seed. And I was afraid and went and hid your talent in the ground. Look, there you have what is yours. But his Lord answered and said to him, you wicked and lazy servant, you knew that I reap where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed, so you ought to have deposited my money with the bankers, and at my coming I would have received back with my own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to him who has 10 talents. And for to everyone who has, more will be given, and he will have abundance. But from him who does not have, even what he has will be taken away. And cast the unprofitable servant into outer darkness. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Obviously, if you mess up your budget one month, you're not going to go to jail. Don't worry about it. But awesome. So a number of things I like to bring out with this, again, is kind of drastic. Some people refuse to get involved in a retirement fund or 401k. Well, because that's like gambling. You put money into the stock market and you're gambling. Really? And then why did he say here, so you ought to have deposited my money with the bankers, and at my coming I would have received back my own with interest. There's nothing wrong with investing, okay? So those of you who think that there is, there isn't. That was only one person in my lifetime who said that. I thought it was kind of funny. But I've seen people, I don't know how they do it. They're making barely anything, almost no money at all. Like $10 an hour, customer service type of a deal. And they live on their own. They're paying their rent. They're paying their food. And they're probably some of the most charitable people I've ever met in my life. I'm like, you've got to be kidding. How are you doing this? And it's just a matter of their heart. And every time I see how they get blessed by God, all of a sudden something will come their way that doesn't come to other people. You can't outgive God. I know one people I do taxes for. She lives in a trailer park. She's retired. All she has is her Social Security. I do her taxes so she can get a homestead credit because she pays rent on the place where her trailer is. And she's tithing and she's giving, on top of it, and there's offerings on so little money. And she's learning to live off of her means. She lives off the rest. She knows how to do that. But she's able to give happily, and God always provides for her. So many times I see people, I don't have enough to give. Well, you're making $150,000 a year. That type of a thing. And I just wanted to throw that out there. I love this parable. I've loved it for years. There's many, many things that you can teach on it. But I just want to take those couple things, take that away. You need to be a steward over what God gives you. And like I mentioned last week, God will provide for your entire life. So, like I mentioned last week, what he gives you today is supposed to be for your entire life. Just because you have it doesn't mean you can spend it. Or it doesn't mean that you should. I'm not going to tell that story again, but one of these days when you get up to retirement and you're going to be screaming to God, God, I have nothing. I don't have anything. Help me, help me, help me. What did you do with that raise? What did you do with that tax return? What did you do with that job promotion? Right? So he's going to be asking you a lot of questions, So think about that as we're walking through this. It doesn't mean you can't do something nice for yourself. I'm not trying to take that away from anybody. I like nice things. I just don't like to pay full price. So Goodwill's my best friend, sometimes Amazon, wherever. those of you who have the handouts, you'll be able to see this. If not, I'm just going to try to read it off to you. The one part that I'm posting for today that I'm going to talk about today is the budgeting section. There's also a debt section for later on and an investment section for later on as well. But for the budget section, it's like, how often do you create a budget for your expenses? 28% said monthly, 17% said quarterly, 11% said annually. 61% said never. That scared me a little bit. I'm glad you're here. Let's put it that way. Okay. Do you track all of your income and expenses? That's split 50-50. Some yes, some no. How has budgeting impacted your financial situation? Well, let me tell you, the ones who are budgeting, I can tell there's a couple of people in here, there's like 3 or 4 of them where it's just like, I'm doing great. I have everything in my emergency fund. I'm fully funded in that. I budget all the time. I look at it on a monthly basis. And they also say budgeting significantly improved my financial situation. So I would like to meet those people. So I love that. But then some 11% say they worsen. And I'm going to guess this is what's happening, is that sometimes you get into a budgeting situation. There are many different people who teach budgeting, and we're going to go over that in a second. Everybody's got a different opinion of what you can do. Budgeting is not one-stop shopping. What works for Julie is not going to work for Janet, is not going to work for Carmen. Everybody's got something different. We got different personalities. God made us different. So we need to decide what is going to work for you, okay? So sometimes when people go to, I see them go to a David Ramsey course, a ton of people fail it because that's not their personality. It's not going to work, There's no way you can be 100% debt-free if you're just, especially in today's society. And most of us who start budgeting for the first time, we're already too far in debt. Trying to get out is going to be a challenge, let's put it that way. So that's why some people say it's worsened, because for the first time in their life, they're seeing what their expenses are and what their net income is at the end of the month, which is probably negative. How confident are you in your budgeting abilities? 22% said very confident, somewhat confident, etc. So 61% of the people do not currently budget or track income and expenses. 61% don't show improvement in their finances when they budget, and 61% don't seek outside advice. So that's a thought. So 6 out of every 10 people in here have a little bit of an issue with that. It's not a bad thing. That's why you're here today. Next slide, please. How confident are you with managing your finances? 17% are very confident, 56% are somewhat confident, the rest. Do you have an emergency fund? 1/3 of the people say yes, it's fully funded. 1/3 of the people say yes, but it's not fully funded. 1/3 of the people say no, I don't have one at all. Who are the people? So for those of you who do, what tools do you use to create your budget? 28% said they still do it on pen and paper, 17% spreadsheet like an Excel, and 56% say nothing. And by the way, if you see some of these percentages and they don't add up to 100, that's because sometimes people gave multiple answers. Okay. It's not that I can't do math, I really can. I just want to let you know that. And do you seek advice or resources to improve your budgeting? 61% said yes, which is weird because 61% of the people don't. It's interesting because what one question says doesn't necessarily match some of the other questions. 61% said that they do seek advice, and 39% said that they don't. Next slide, please. But biggest budgeting challenges. So I'll start with the biggest one. 56% said understanding how to budget to begin with. Okay. We're going to start going over some of that today. The next one at 39% said unexpected expenses. Those do pop up. There's ways to plan for that, and we're going to talk about some of those today. 20% said saving for retirement. 6% just said lack of motivation. 6% said lack of time. 17% said income variability. And that can happen especially if you're in sales or commissions or things like that. And sometimes just sticking to the budget discipline at 22%. So everybody's got a challenge. I have challenges. There's things I try to build into my budget and into just my process to help cover those things. And we're going to begin to talk about some of those. Next slide, please. So the one thing that we have to do is that we need to create a spending plan. Luke 14 says, suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Won't you first sit down and estimate the cost to see if you have enough money to complete it? Saving money in Proverbs 6, go to the ant, thou sluggard, consider her ways and be wise, which having no guide, overseer, or ruler, provideth her meat in the summer and gathereth her food in the harvest. They save. Proverbs 21, there is treasure to be desired and oil in the dwelling of the wise, but a foolish man spendeth it up. That's from the Living Bible. The wise man saves for the future, but the foolish man spends whatever he gets. Okay. There's more. I think I said there's like over 2,300 references in the Bible for money. One of the most talked about subjects in the Bible. But building up an emergency fund. Okay, even Proverbs 22 says, a prudent man foresees the difficulties ahead and prepares for them. The simpleton goes blindly on and suffers the consequences. So you need to plan. And again, the easiest way to do, starting this process can seem overwhelming. Starting it can be difficult. Learning new habits, right? But once you get into it, it becomes really simple. So there's things that you can automatically do with your paycheck right away. There's things that I automatically have paid. So once all those things happen, then I get to budget the rest, which is really, really simple. And once that's happening, you'll learn to live. It's called reverse budgeting. You start with, here's what you make. You start subtracting off. Here's tithes, here's all of your health insurance, here's all of this, here's investments, here's 401k. Boom, this is what I have left to live on. If you're making $5,000 a month or $60,000 a year, you don't start your budget from $5,000. This is what I have left to live on after all of these miscellaneous expenses, which include protections for you. Let's just say that. Next slide, please. So who do I follow? I have 3 people listed up here. So there's David Ramsey. Everybody's heard of David Ramsey? Okay. What about Robert Kiyosaki? Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Ever hear of Rich Dad, Poor Dad? As of January 2025, he claims to have $1 billion in debt. But his net worth is about $800 million. Everybody know what net worth is? Net worth is all of your assets minus your liabilities. That's your net worth. So if he's got $1 billion in debt, but his net worth is $800 million, he's got a lot of assets. Long story, we'll get into it. But David Ramsey doesn't agree with Robert. Robert does not agree with David Ramsey or Susie Orman. Susie Orman doesn't agree with David Ramsey or Robert Kiyosaki. It's crazy. Robert Kiyosaki has filed for bankruptcy several times. He's formed many different businesses. He hasn't been successful all of the time. A lot of his success came in real estate, passive income. So he buys a property. I have a friend of mine who's doing this. He's got 7 Airbnbs. He wants to get 3 more. So he buys a property, he fixes it up, gets it rented out, takes the equity off of that, gets a loan, buys another property, takes the equity, buys another property, next thing you know, you are so leveraged, you have so much debt out there, if it comes tumbling down, it will come tumbling down. And for people who are doing that, you got to know what you're doing. Okay, so when you read a book like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, many people have sued him because of some of the things that he taught. But half of it is luck. It's where you're investing. There's certain things about it. It's your personality. You better know the numbers in order to handle stuff like that. And the person I know that has 7 Airbnbs and looking to do more, he comes to me quite often, and we have a lot of discussions, and I throw out some ideas for him. And hopefully, so far, a lot of those have worked. Go back, please. I don't know what happened, but there you go, stay there. So that's him. David Ramsey is literally on the opposite end, 0 debt. His claim is that you should all be debt-free. That should be your goal. So 0 debt, $1 billion in debt. Where do you want to be? I don't want to be $1 billion in debt. But at the same time, I don't necessarily agree with everything David Ramsey said. When my pastor asked me to teach a retirement course at my church, and he gave me the David Ramsey book, so I'm not teaching out of this. I don't agree with half of what he says. Some of it is really, really super good. Other stuff you got to be careful of. David Ramsey also does not believe in credit cards. If for a mortgage, again, he believes in no debt, but if you have to take a mortgage, no more than a 15-year. He kind of reminds me of Mr. Potter in It's a Wonderful Life. He wants everybody to live in Pottersville, renting from him. They just can't do it. If you want to get a house these days, you're gonna have to take out a mortgage. You have to think about those things, but at the same time, when you're taking out a mortgage, you have to think about how much is it that you can afford. So you just have to be smart about it. Susie Orman is kind of in the middle. She kind of agrees with David. She kind of agrees that you have to invest. She agrees that yes, you probably need some credit cards every now and then, but she also discusses moderation. She came out of the restaurant business, of all things, and out of the restaurant business, she went to school with Merrill Lynch, became a financial advisor. Her wealth came from writing all of her books. Okay, so everybody gets their wealth differently. Everybody's got an opinion. She has an opinion that's popular and can sell. So a lot of times if you're reading some of these books, just what's going to work? Does this make sense? Sometimes if I'm reading a theological book, I kind of read it from the standpoint of, okay, okay, that's not in the Bible. Okay, I'll understand this, but I'll push that aside. Certain things are going to work for you, certain things aren't. That's how you have to approach some of these books. Again, it's not one-stop shopping. If you could move ahead, please. So you have to create and follow your tailor-made plan. Each one of you is going to have one that's going to be tailor-made. By the way, at the end of this, I don't like going more than 4 weeks, because after that, for those of you who want like one-on-one appointments or whatever, so we can sit down and kind of review your budget, review your finances, what's the best things for you, that type of a thing. I'm going to have that set up at the very end so that we can do that. So again, it's going to be your tailor-made plan. What are your needs? Pay off mortgage. That's my number one goal. Do you know why? We almost lost everything during the housing crisis. For the first time, I feel like I know what my grandparents went through in the Depression, when you almost lose everything. My financial advisor is trying to tell me, no, you should be investing these in this, this, and this, because your return is going to be that much better because my interest rate's only at 3%. It's called peace of mind. I don't ever want to be in the position again where I'm going to be concerned about, am I going to have a roof over my head and my wife and my kids' head? But that's me. Some of us who had some hard times during the mortgage crisis, that's our number one goal, is to pay off our mortgage. I've seen that time and time again. I'm a consultant, so when the mortgage crisis happens, all of a sudden the economy started to tank. People stopped using consultants. Nobody wanted a consultant. Nobody was hiring. I mean, it was a disaster, but that's what happened to me. At the same time, some people prefer their cars over their house. I saw this firsthand. I had a consulting gig in Rocky Mount, North Carolina. It's like you have Charleston, Raleigh, and Rocky Mount forming this triangle. And we had to fly into Greenville or something, and then I had to drive an hour to get to Rocky Mount. And I noticed what were it was like the entire 1 hour drive, it was like a ghost town. All of these rundown houses, they literally look like shacks. It's like, what the heck? And then what was interesting is that they lost my luggage. So later on that night, I had to come back to get my luggage at that airport. It's only like a 1 gate airport. And when I came back, I thought, what the heck? All of these houses, Mercedes, Rolls Royce. It was like, what are they doing? I was absolutely stunned. That's what they live for in that region. They put all their money into their cars, not their house. I was like, wow, that's interesting. Never seen it before, but some people do, you know? Their house over cars, they put it into retirement and financial freedom. But again, I'm going to reiterate what we said last week, we need to discipline yourself for your tailor-made plan. Every budget or well-thought plan takes discipline and self-control. You have to be content with your money, live within your means. You have a car that's worth only $6,000. You've been driving it for a couple of years. That's what you're used to driving. Somebody on the expressway hits you and totals your car. You get a check from the insurance company for $6,000, and you go and buy a $42,000 car. Can you afford it? A couple of people that came to me recently in this past year, 2 different people, every single month they were going deeper and deeper in debt because they could not make they didn't have enough money. And when I look at it, you bought a brand new car, you have a $700 car payment, and you're making $3,500 or $35,000 a year. You can't afford this. Why are you doing this? And the other one, you're strapped here, you're strapped here, you're strapped here. You're already strapped, and then you bought a brand new car. Why? I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but you need to sell that car. You had no business buying that car. I understand you might have needed a car, but this was a want. It was not a need. Don't be content with your goal. Be content with your money, but don't be content with your goals. You want to go after your goals, but you have to learn how to be content with your money. Next slide, please. So for everything that we talked about, everybody's got a different need. Everybody's got a different want. You might want your car, you might want your house, you might want financial freedom, but no matter what your goals are, the basics are the same. Next slide. So, setting your financial priorities. Before diving into the specifics of budgeting, it's crucial to establish your financial priorities. Proper budgeting advocates for the prioritization of essential needs such as food, shelter, transportation, utilities before addressing your expenses. By categorizing your spending, you can ensure that your basic needs are met, paving the way for more strategic financial planning. So it's interesting, we talk about, and later on we're going to talk about listing your expenses. I even just read something today, just on Yahoo during my lunch break. They were talking about that was the best thing that they ever started to do, is that on a monthly basis, they just started to write down all of their expenses. For the first time, it's like, oh my gosh, I spent $600 on that. I spent $1,000 on that. Why did I spend this money? And otherwise some people, they're just spending on their credit card and they pay it off, spend on the credit card. They're not looking at anything. But when you're starting to look at everything that you spend for the first time, it's like, it's a wake-up call. And hopefully that can help change some of your habits. But really, for priorities, tithes and offerings are first, number one, okay? I do taxes for some people in this room. Tithing is not a problem. Sometimes offerings can be. Sometimes we forget about those. The Bible says, you rob me of tithes and offerings. So, if there's a special offering, pray about it. I got to the point, okay, I'm excited. Next year, I'm paying off my house. I can't tell you how excited I am. But I'll tell you how I did that later on. And all of a sudden, where I knew a missionary is coming in October, November, and it's like, And every time, they're asking for a year-long commitment. I'm like, okay, this year I'm not doing anything. I can't. I got to do this. This is my goal right now. And I walk in, and all of a sudden God tells me, double what you've been giving. Really? I thought I was going to have $100 extra a month. No, I'm going to have to spend $100 extra, but when God says it, just do it. It's so easy to obey God. Obedience is better than sacrifice, and God requires obedience. Food. Well, you have to have food, right? Shelter, rent, or mortgage. At the same time, do you need an apartment for $2,000 a month? Probably not. Unless you have a huge family or whatever, or you have the means to, you could do that. Transportation, car, bus, whatever you do. Utilities are huge. Education, for some of you that works, for some of you it doesn't. Some people go to a trade school, some go to a typical university, and then of course, retirement. But again, education. I told the story last week of my kids. No, you're not going to go to my ed. I don't have $40,000 a year for the Milwaukee Institute of Art and Design. I don't have money for you to go to Cornell. No, you're going to go to UW System. You're going to live at home. You're going to pay for your car, and you're going to have a small job for that. Your car and gas will cover everything else. And of course, there's some scholarship opportunities in there, but we paid for the big majority of it. And so when they graduated from college, they graduate with zero debt. Just because you can spend $40,000 a year on a college education doesn't mean that you should. Right? But if you're going to learn a specific trade, I had my son-in-law went, it's called UTech in Chicago. It cost like $35,000, something like that, for a little over a year. But he learned everything there is to know about automotive, and he was immediately out of there. He was like top of his class. He was hired right out of it. He's doing fantastic. That was something worthwhile. If you're going in for a trade, something specific that you're going to work in. But if you're going to go in for something just for the heck of it, because, this is what everybody does when they're 18, you want to rethink that. And of course, priority, I'm 63, so retirement has jumped to the top of that list almost. So I want to retire in 4 years. At one point I thought I was going to retire when I'm 70, because that's when I can max out Social Security. And I thought, I think December I just turned around and said, oh, the heck with that. 67, I'm done. So you get to a point, and this is a freebie. I thought when we retire, we were going to do this, and we were going to do that, and we were going to do this. I'm 63. My knees don't work. My hips don't work. I can't go hiking like I would probably do. So, you can plan some things when you're younger. Budget, that's also a part of budgeting, is taking care of yourself, having a vacation, but you don't have to spend $20,000 every year to go somewhere, to England, to Disney World or something like that. You don't have to do that every year, but you still can plan for some of those and get those inside of your budget. I want to say do some of those when you're younger, because when you're getting older, you're probably going to do it from a wheelchair. Next slide, please. You start by documenting all the sources of your income. This is how you start budgeting. Start documenting all your sources of income. By the way, how many people here did their homework? Did you try to write down a budget? Thank you. Anybody else? No? Yes. Some of you did. Yeah, that's right about 50-50. Oh, wow, 2 more? Yes. Oh, 1 more. Never mind, Corey's pointing, but Carmen said yes for you. Awesome. No, I don't need to see them. I'm not going to grade them. The idea behind it is I want you to start thinking about what you have. And then with each of these classes, you can begin to expand on it. So when you go home tonight, you're going to be rewriting that budget based on what you learned today. And same thing next week, and same thing next week, the week after that. And then later on, okay, I'm still struggling with this. What can I do? Let's sit down. Let's talk about it. Let's walk through this and see how we can manage this. So you want to list all of your income. So you have a job, you have savings, interest, you have investments, you have a side hustle. I do taxes, so that's my side hustle. Some people do crafts. My daughter sells some kind of journals, that type of a thing. If you have a side hustle, that's great. Or you have one full-time, one part-time job, or if you have that. I love savings, interest. This is a freebie as well. There's one guy I do a budget for every single day for the past 20 years, at least. 21 years. He's learning disabled, so he can work, he can do all these things, but when it comes to numbers and everything else, he can't. And I hate to say it, but he does pay me on a monthly basis. I don't charge him anything. So here he's got $18,000 in a savings account at his regular bank. And how much does Chase or US Bank, what's their interest rate that they give you? Like 0.011%. So all year on $18,000, he made like $5.60 something cents. It was nuts. And so I finally talked him into letting me put his money into a high yield savings account. You can find those online. You can get 4 point something percent. And so we did that. And the first year, it wasn't even a full year. It was only 8 months. He earned like $500 something in interest as opposed to $5.65. So this is probably a good idea if you're going to start an emergency fund, or if you already have one and you don't have it into a high yield savings account, get one. You can go online and find them. You'll have ones that are BMO, APY, or there's Barclays, there's SoFi, there's a number of those online. What you want to look for is it FDIC insured. If they're insured by the federal government, you can have up to $250,000 in there, and if something happens to that bank, you're protected. So, look for that. After you list your income, you're going to want to list all of your expenses. Again, this is the eye opener. This is what's going to begin to make you think about what you're doing when you're going to the store, when, whatever it is that you're doing. You track all of your expenses. You categorize them into fixed expenses, such as rent or mortgage payments. You're going to have those every single month. And then variable expenses like groceries and entertainment. Using a budgeting app or a simple spreadsheet, keep an accurate record of every dollar spent. I'm 63. I don't use apps, right? Most baby boomers, they use pen and pencils. And the people my age who work in offices end up using Excel. And then all of a sudden, the younger generation, everybody uses apps. It's crazy. I had to do a connect group for the church, and it was a retirement class. I taught here once. And most of the people who came to my retirement class were like 55 to 59 years old. They're older. Most of those people did not use apps. So it was really challenging. It was hard to take attendance. It was hard to give them notifications. I had to get all of their emails on the side. And, and the pastor wanted everybody to respond using this app. And I said, they don't use them. They're old. Okay. My mom got her first email address when she was 86. So, when you get older, things just kind of, you get to a point where you can't take in any more technology. Anyway, so you want to use whatever is comfortable for you. There's a number of budgeting apps that are out there. I use Excel. I have a tool that I'm going to be emailing everybody tonight. It is in Excel. If you have it, you can use it. If not, we'll figure something else out. And try to keep an accurate record of every single dollar spent. You'll be surprised. Next slide, please. So now this approach is the David Ramsey approach. You want to allocate funds using what he calls a zero-based budget. So his zero-based budget, he's famous for it, requires you to allocate every single dollar of your income to a specific expense category until you reach zero. This ensures that your income matches your expenses, leaving no money unaccounted for. The zero-based budget helps you allocate funds efficiently and avoid unnecessary funding. But there's things that it needs to consider. it doesn't always work, especially when you have variable income. Or Christmas is around the corner. I mean, there's things that you want to do about it. So looking at a zero-based budget, this means considering an emergency fund, investing into retirement savings, and extra payments to pay off debt. So if you want to use a zero-based approach, this is kind of taking David Ramsey and kind of sliding it into Susie Orman's field a little bit, is you plan your budget, and whatever I have left, I'm going to throw into here on top of, so I'm already putting money into savings. I'm already putting money into here. Okay, I've got a little bit extra. I'm going to throw it over here, But I think, what's interesting for me is when I plan my budget, it gets difficult. I have to leave so much of my money into my checking account because I get paid every 2 weeks. And so the days I get paid every month are different. And then some months I have a 3 paychecks in that month. So I have to plan the timing. I just can't plan on October 1st, I'm going to get paid, and then here's all my expenses. It gets difficult that way because I'm not going to get paid till October 7th. And the next one will be a little bit later, and so on. So you have to be careful how you start budgeting that. Can we go to the next slide, please? So one thing that he also talks about is prioritizing debt repayment. One thing I love about this is that you want to talk about peace of mind. It will give you peace of mind. So my stress levels have dropped since I've started paying off debt. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more. He's also famous for what's called the debt snowball. You want to start with the smallest balance first, pay off that. Well, so here's a listing of all your debts. The one that's the smallest, you pay that one off first. Then you pay off the next one. Then you pay off the next one. And until you start getting everything paid off 100%. But it's a preference. It works great on your psyche, and with the right discipline, you can do that. And I've seen people who have done that. Next slide, please. So here's a classic example of a snowball method. So you have different types of debt. You have a credit card with a balance of $500 and interest rate of 11.5%. You have a credit card of $1,700 at 16%. You have a personal loan at 7% at 9%. So, you have a credit card of $8,600 at 23%, a car at $12,000 at 3%, and a mortgage for $150,000 at 4.67%. The snowball method says you pay the $500 first, then the next month you take whatever you're putting on there and add it to the payment you're making to the credit card for $1,700 until that's paid. Then you take all those payments that you would have made and just go off on the $7,000, then the $8,600 and the $12,000. Okay, that's the snowball method. Now, if you go to a financial advisor, he'll tell you something totally different. Next slide, please. This is the preferred financial advisor method. You pay off whatever balance has the highest interest rate. So you have a credit, the very first thing that you pay off is not the $500. The very first thing you pay off is the $8,600 at 23%. Why? Because why pay 23% interest on something? I would want to get rid of that credit card totally if you were paying 23%. And then the next one would be the $1,700 at 16% and so on. You just follow the interest rate going down. So based on this, you'd pay off your mortgage before you'd pay off your car. It's okay. So that's the financial advisor method. What would I do? See, I got mine mixed. The very first thing I would do, can you go back one slide, please? I like the psych thing because this works, okay? I start with the snowball method. I pay off these little balances at first. Why? Because I'm more liquid. I have more flexibility. And you feel like, yes, I just did something. I accomplished something. I paid something off. And you feel a little bit more freedom. After I pay off those first two, next slide, please, then I revert to the interest rate, okay? But quite frankly, I'm going to pay off my car faster than I pay off my mortgage, probably. So it's what you feel, number one, it's what you feel comfortable with. Some people just want to do the snowball method all the way through. I don't like paying high interest rates, so I'd probably kill that one. But again, I start off with the snowball and I go into the financial advisor method. Questions on that? Okay. Next slide, please. So, building an emergency fund. We talked about this. Daniel already spilled the beans. David Ramsey was talking about a $1,000 fund. A $1,000 emergency fund isn't going to do you anything if you have a flood in your house like we just had. It's not going to do it, and your insurance isn't covering it. What are you going to do? $1,000 isn't going to do anything if we have COVID and you get laid off. What are you going to do for the next 3 to 6 months? Right? So realistically, you want to aim to save at least 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses. And sometimes that's easier said than done, because when you sit down and what do I really need? Oh, I guess we're not going to go out to eat. That's off the list. You start taking things off the list. This is what I absolutely have to have. And budget for those things in your emergency fund. Now, some people, David Ramsey would disagree with this. Susie Orman likes the idea. Is emergency funds can consist of a savings account, which is what most people do. Hopefully a high yield savings account. You don't want to put something with a regular savings account where we're earning 0.01% or whatever it is. Your HELOC, your home equity line of credit. I have a line of credit on my house. It's at 0. It's been at 0. But I can hit it up for $23,000 if I want to. That's my backup plan. I do have money in the savings. I do have money in retirement. I got some things there, but it's okay to partially rely on a home equity line of credit as long as you're not using it. Rely on that for an emergency. Right? Does that make sense? And again, something like that, if you're relying on a loan, you're relying on something like that. You got to be disciplined. You have to have self-control. You can't, this is how I'm going to go from a $6,000 car to a $42,000 car. I'll just take it out my home equity loan, and you're just totally leveraged. You don't want to do that. Emergencies. Save it for emergencies. Loans on tap. You could have, some people have a HELOC, some just have a line of, or they have a home equity loan, but it's not a line of credit. Which means a home equity line of credit, for those of you who don't know, you can take some out, pay it off, take some out, pay it off. You can't do that with a fixed home equity loan. But again, savings accounts are best if you are in the position to save. And if you're just starting to budget for the first time, you may not be. And that's okay. We'll figure that out. Next slide, please. Save in interest. With your emergency fund in place, you can now focus on saving and investing. I disagree. This is David Ramsey talking. David Ramsey's approach is you have no business putting money into a retirement fund until all your debt is paid off and until you have an emergency fund. I totally disagree. So do the majority of financial advisors who are out there. You should be doing all of it at the same time. Ramsey advocates for long-term, low-risk investments that can grow steadily over time, helping you achieve financial independence. Most advisors advocate saving for retirement while paying down debt, while creating an emergency fund, etc., which makes sense. So again, it's budgeting for here's your money. Here's $5,000 a month. Out of that, you've got all of your taxes. You have there's things out there. There's retirement fund that's out there. So all of these things are just automatic. You shouldn't even have to think about those things. Then you have your net check, and that's what you budget on. You do it that way, it becomes very easy to budget. You don't have to think about your 401k. You don't have to think about these other things. And I'm just going to throw something out there. I'm a huge advocate for saying, do not borrow against your 401k. Do not cash in your 401ks. I know somebody who's changed so many jobs, and every single time they cash in their 401k, they just turn 60, they have 0. You can't do it. Or what happens if you borrow against your 401? I'm going to borrow $30,000 out from my 401k. It's my money. I'm paying myself back, right? Boom, you get laid off tomorrow. Automatically, that $30,000 that you borrowed is treated as a withdrawal. You pay fines and penalties on it and taxes. Be careful. You need to know that if you're ever going to consider borrowing from your 401k. My advice is, don't, once it's in your 401k, don't touch it. I'm sorry, for what? Can you say? Well, they'll automatically take 20% out for taxes and then 10% out for fees. That's just federal. The state of Wisconsin, you're talking 6%, so you're talking 36% of that is gone. Next slide, please. So these are recommended, and I want to point out these are ranges for you to work with. I'm going to be having an Excel spreadsheet. You can start plugging in your numbers and seeing what those percentages are. So you have your income. The first 10% is tithes, 5% offerings, 10 to 15% is a goal for retirement. And my retirement classes, is that going to be enough for retirement? I'm looking at them. How many of you even contribute 10% to your 401k? Not a single hand goes up. Nobody contributed. Oh, Corey, you contribute 10% to your 401k? Very good. So he's good. He knows what he's got. Some people who here don't even know if they have a 401k, which is scary. Most people do. Well, and nowadays, some employers start it automatically. As soon as you start a job, they do it. So I don't know if I have one or not. If you don't know, you should know. And I hate to say it, it's usually the younger people, and that's okay. We'll work with you. But so 10 to 15% for retirement, 20 to 25% for taxes. And when I say taxes, that's federal, state, and FICA. Okay. 25 to 30% for housing these are the recommendations. 10 to 20% for savings, 5 to 10% for utilities, 10 to 15% for food, 10 to 20% for insurance, 5 to 15% for debt repayment, 5 to 10% for personal care, 5 to 10% for entertainment and leisure, and 5 to 10% for miscellaneous. Some of us treat it like it's like 50% for entertainment, and we really can't do that. But again, it's what are your needs? Do you want your car instead of your house? What is it that you want? What makes you happy in life? And budget accordingly. Now, can you go on to the next slide? So what I've done up here is that I plugged in, we have a gross monthly income of $5,000. And the very first things I listed were 10% for a 401k, then there's health insurance, then an HSA. Okay, I'm going to talk about this for just a quick second. So, all of this is pre-tax stuff, okay? So we're looking at $3,500 before taxes. So many people I'm finding, so many medical bills. You have health insurance, you're covered. Number one, you need to know what network you're in, because sometimes if you go to a doctor that's out of network, you're going to be paying through the nose. You don't want to do that. At the same time, you need to understand your deductibles. You need to understand your maximum out of pockets. And so sometimes when you have multiple plans to choose from, I don't even care what this other stuff is. What's your maximum out of pocket? So that's what I look at. So then how am I going to meet that maximum out of pocket? That's where an HSA comes in. All right. So $500 a month for an HSA, that's $6,000 a year. So if I have, maximum out of pocket of $6,000, I'll put that in my HSA. Why? It's tax-free. No taxes on it. Gone are the days when you could claim medical expenses on your taxes. I think I've done about 4 people in the past 5 years. but you have to have a huge amount of medical expenses above and beyond your insurance and everything else. And you also have to have a whole lot of other things to deduct. So it's almost non-existent. So to take $6,000 and call it tax-free, that's huge, right? So, and then what happens if you have the HSA and you don't use it? Well, it stays in there. And some HSAs, they're kind of formed almost like an IRA, so they can grow because they're invested, which is interesting. And some people continue just to put in, max out how much they put in there because they're maxing out their IRAs and 401ks. I'm going to put all this money in my HSA as well too, and that's going to grow. That scares me because that wasn't the intent of the HSA, but those are the loopholes, and you can do that. You know, my family, we max out our deductible, our maximum out of pocket every year. We totally max that out every year. So, you know, Sodi has more titanium inside of her than, yeah. So then you have your taxes, FICA, state, federal. So basically after all this, granted, you know, this is aggressive, but here's $2,700 left that you can spend out of $5,000. Next slide, please. So again, your total take-home paycheck, here's your tithes, here's your mortgage, here's your food, utilities, using the percentages that we have on the other page. And oops, now we've hit 135%. And now we've spent too much. Again, those percentages are ranges. Just because that percentage there doesn't necessarily mean you have to spend it. So your food might only be 10% because you're not fat like me, you're really skinny, you don't eat much. Maybe I don't know, maybe your utilities are lower for whatever reason, or transportation, or maybe you have no debt, or maybe you have a ton of debt. So the percentages for everybody are going to be a little bit different. But you know, there are guidelines, and so when you start making your budget for the first time, you're going to start applying some of these and see, how does this work for me? What can I do? It's a guideline. It's not saying I have to meet this goal, but you start plugging your numbers into this, and you're going to probably be, wow, I spend 35% of my income on this. And where can I trim back? What can I do? What can I do to save for the future? Again, you know, I think one of my goals is retirement. And I think this should be for all of us. If I can put anything into the young people, how old are you? I'm sorry. In the gray? Yes. You're 30. Really? She looks so young. God bless you. But I mean, I really try to push for younger people to invest. Oh, How old are you? 23? Well, we're going to talk about investing in retirement. And you start off now doing a minimal amount. You'll be better off than someone starting in their 50s doing a whole bunch, you know? So, and we'll get there. But you know, young people want to come to my budgeting class, nor do they want to come to a retirement class, you know? And it's like, you need to know some of these things. Social Security is changing, Medicare is changing. All of those things are changing. What is it going to look like? What can I plan for? You know, and so some of it's kind of scary, but some of it, well, this is what my plan is going to be. It's easy. Boom, I'm going to set this up and go from there. Speaking of retirement, is there another slide? I don't think there is. Okay. Speaking of retirement, a lot of times I'll get these little flyers in the mail. You know, come to Bartolotta's and have a steak dinner, and we're going to talk to you about, and of course they're trying to get you, you know, and the biggest push nowadays is to have all of your IRAs and everything converted to a Roth IRA. Unless you're making very little money and you're in a small tax bracket and you have $4 million in a retirement fund, there's no reason to do it. When I was so funny because when I was teaching the retirement class, one week I was teaching on Social Security and tax strategies. And I came off and I just told everybody, if all you're going to have is $500,000 approximately in your retirement funds and you're married, you have no business having a Roth IRA. The very next week, the financial advisor came from Northwestern Mutual, and he totally downplayed a traditional IRA. He says, you need everything in a Roth IRA. And everybody turned around and looked at me. I said, okay, stop. Let's discuss this. I'm not going to let this sit out here. And first of all, I said, how old is he? I said, he's 33. You know, when the mortgage crisis happens, he was still at home, right? You know, so, I mean, everybody's got something different going on. I do taxes. He doesn't do taxes. No. Wow. Thank God for that. So, but what it came down to is when you look at what's happening with the tax laws, you're married, filing a joint, you have your standard deduction is $30,000, which means the first $30,000 of your income is tax-free. Then Trump just put into place, you have $6,000 if you're for each person who's retired. So right now, once Sodi and I retire, that's $42,000 standard deduction. The first $42,000 of my income is tax-free. Why would I want to convert to a Roth IRA? Because that would mean I would have to pay taxes on my regular IRA, convert it to a Roth, and then when I take my money out of a Roth IRA, when I retire, there's no taxes. Well, I'm not paying taxes anyway. Why do I want to pay taxes now? Because you want to make this financial advisor rich. So be careful of that. You know, if you have questions regarding Roth conversions or any investments, things like that, give me a call. I'll be more than happy to work that out. So